after the floods had pretty much subsided, I could actually get to the workshop. And it was really, really shocking.
Hi, can you introduce yourself first?
My name is Nick Narcorn, and I'm the sole trader proprietor of Nagara Automotive. And this is my GoFundMe video.
Here you are in your workshop with all these wonderful cars. Just tell us about this yellow one behind you.
This is a customer's car. It's a Rochdale Olympic made in the 1960s, very revolutionary for its time. Composite fiberglass body, no metal chassis at all, so super modern, high-tech for the 1960s and very rare.
So you are a preserver of old beautiful things.
Yes, that's the way I look at it. I love antiques, I love museums, I like industry. I'm very interested in industry and the way things are made. And classic cars are a microcosm of the history of manufacturing, the history of technology, and also art and design. Because before computer modelling and the extensive use of wind tunnels, the look of a car was really an art form. It's a design discipline, but it's also an art discipline. And many older cars are simply beautiful objects. And it's important that this history is preserved. And also that they're kept running and they're not just museum pieces.
So how old were you when you drove your first car?
I was 8.
And what car was that?
It was my mother's Mini, the old-fashioned type of Mini, and I could just about reach the pedals and just about peer over the steering wheel to see where I was going.
And how old were you when you fixed your first car or started working on fixing cars?
The same age, because my stepfather used to do his own servicing, and I used to help him. My grandfather didn't do his own servicing, he'd pay someone to do it, but he quite liked me to help him check things over. So really, from the age of 8, I was completely into it.
So what kind of customers have you had over the years, and what kind of cars have they had?
Well, everything from very ordinary old cars, which are just daily transport, to classic cars, which are daily transport, through to classic cars, which are more collector's items that are there for use at weekends or holidays.
These two cars behind you, to someone who doesn't know anything about cars, they look like they're very, very expensive, that therefore because you're a classic car mechanic, you're bound to have money, that these people have money, because they look like beautiful, expensive things. But is that not the case?
It's not the case at all. A lot of people with classic cars at this end of the market, sometimes it's their only car. Most of my customers are not wealthy. They're people who love their classic cars and they're on fairly tight budgets.
You prefer classic cars. Do you think they're better than modern cars?
In many ways they are better. They tend to last, if they're looked after, they'll last a long time. They're easy to repair compared to a lot of modern cars. The parts, if there's a good club, the parts are cheap. Modern cars, way too complicated, too many computers. Very often a tiny bit of damage to a component will fry a computer. The scrap yards are full of cars which are not repairable because of the electronics. Mechanically they're all fine. Bodywork and so on, all brand new, and these cars are getting scrapped at an alarming rate because of not being repairable or the electronics being so expensive that the car gets written off. The technology's been wasted because we could have very lightweight internal combustion engine cars doing 100, even 200 miles to the gallon with modern technology, but instead we've got bigger, heavier cars where the fuel consumption equivalent electric is not a lot better than an old internal combustion engine. I think modern cars have got a real problem, and it's illegal to use your phone whilst driving, which is very, very sensible. Yet it's totally legal to jump into a hire car with complicated screens you have to fiddle around with. The lovely thing about a switch is that once you know where it is, you can reach for it without looking, turn it on, turn it off, adjust it. I'm really, really keen on old car interiors, and I like the design. I like the attention to detail that many of them have. Some of the interesting old plastics, Bakelite and so on. And then you obviously have the traditional wood and leather of an old car, which is beautiful. The instruments especially, I like the analog instruments rather than the digital ones you have today. Yeah. I like the old style made by Lucas very often, toggle switches, rotary switches, sliders, and some are better than others. I would say Japanese cars of the 60s and 70s had really beautiful switches compared to British cars, for example, for some reason. They spent a lot of time about the tactility of the switches.
Tell us about the day of the flood.
Well, I wasn't here on the day of the flood because the road was impassable. But I was, this is the 2024 flood.
Yeah.
But I was there either the day after or the day after that, I can't quite remember. But anyway, after the floods had pretty much subsided, I could actually get to the workshop. And it was really, really shocking. I mean, there's roughly 2.5 feet of water came into the workshop, carrying with it a lot of mud. So lots of things on the lower shelves. And of course, if you're putting things on lower shelves, they tend to be the heavier things. So things like power tools were on lower shelves. We had 2.5 feet. So I lost a lot of power tools. My welder was damaged. And more importantly, customers' cars were damaged. And my own MG, which was in here at the time, that was damaged. So the repair work and the remedial work and the clearing out of mud and the sorting out of parts and having to work out which things were savable and which things I had to throw away. It was horrible, and it took months to sort out. Of course, getting the mud out of the workshop was only a few days' work, but then there's sorting through all the parts, sorting through all the tools, repairing some of the tools, throwing away some of the tools, sometimes repairing a tool which would then work for 5 minutes, electric power tool, and then it would give up again because it had been damaged by the water. And then of those repairing the customers' cars, repairing the MG.
Did you manage to save all the cars in your workshop that were affected by the flood?
Yes, yeah. They were all saved, some at more cost than others, but yes, I mean, with a classic car, everything is repairable pretty much.
Tell us about the second flood.
Well, the second flood was in January, so just over a month ago from now. And that wasn't quite as serious as the first flood, but it was probably about just under a foot of water. And of course, having learnt from the first flood, I didn't have power tools on bottom shelves, so it wasn't quite such a disaster. But there again, it just looms over every winter. It's going to loom over the business, will it be flooded or not?
So there's a real risk that it could happen again, like any time.
There's a complete risk it could happen again, and to have to be constantly worried about that is not something I want to do. So it's a lot of the costs of the flood have been paid for out of borrowing, so it'd be good to pay some of that money back.
What was the most expensive piece of your equipment that was damaged in the flood?
The most expensive piece of equipment was probably the welder. They vary in price from a few £100 to several £1,000s. Mine is like a sort of a middling kind of price range, but even so, replacing it would be £1,000. And then there's many electrical items, drills and angle grinders, many spare parts that need replacing. And I have replaced some of those parts already with the money I've got from the GoFundMe. But simple things like the shop vacuum cleaner, which the one I had amazingly still worked after the flood, but not for very long. And I was using it the other day and it caught fire. You don't expect vacuum cleaners to catch fire, but obviously it had been flood damaged. So I had to buy a new one of those. There's a long list of things, so it's it's several £1,000s to do it.
What makes this workshop different to other workshops, would you say?
I think it's that very often customers like to get involved and they like to learn skills. Over the years, I've had quite a few customers who have started out employing me to do a job for them. They've then come into the workshop to learn how to do the jobs themselves. And they end up being completely self-sufficient and they don't need me at all, which for me is a complete, it's a win. Because we're in a society in which hands-on skills, practical skills are dwindling. A lot of people in the 60s and 70s and into the 80s would know how to service their own vehicle, for example. Now virtually no one knows how to service their own vehicle. We're losing hands-on skills like mad, not just in car maintenance, but general mechanical skills. If someone's washing machine goes wrong, can they fix it themselves? Probably not. Any mechanical item is now designed almost to be unfixable. So that's another political aspect of what I do. So that's really important to me, and getting my customers involved in acquiring those skills for me is a bigger win than anything else.
And you enjoy working with your hands?
Oh yeah, I mean making things is great. I mean making things is the most enjoyable part, I'd say.
You called yourself an environmental petrol head. What is it?
Environmental petrol head.
An environmental petrol head.
Yeah. Well, climate change is absolutely real. It's absolutely a problem. And it may seem counterintuitive to love petrol and be an environmentalist. And I don't love petrol because I love fossil fuels. I love petrol because I love old cars, and old cars by and large run on petrol or diesel. But this is not the future. The future has got to be renewable energy. Now, whether that renewable energy is made to produce renewable liquid fuel that an internal combustion engine can run on, that's one way of doing it, or whether it produces electricity and you have electric cars, that's another way of doing it. And for 20 odd years, I was an environmental consultant working on energy and energy systems. So it's something that's really close to my heart.
If you go out of business, what skills will be lost?
Well, I've got a fairly varied skill set. Everything from fabricating things out of metal, welding, repairing machines, rebuilding engines, designing parts for cars. For the MG, for example, I designed my own rear suspension system and built that from scratch. There are a lot of skills that any mechanic has. Someone who's interested in design, like I am, I suppose I have extra skills because I have a design background as well as a background in car mechanics and welding. And it's not important to save every single classic car, obviously. It just would be unrealistic. But we still ought to preserve some of our history and use those skills for the future. I mean, if heaven forbid there was a problem with the internet, I don't know, who knows, war or some other thing happens and the internet goes down, people will be helpless. We need these skills. We need to reindustrialize in the greenest way possible. There should be a right to repair, and I think this should be in legislation. So often things are made with built-in obsolescence, they're not able to be repaired. or if a part goes wrong, you have to buy a whole assembly to replace it. You can't just replace the part. There's a marvellous YouTuber whose name I forget at the moment, and he's a washing machine engineer, and he looks at washing machines over the years and showing how they're becoming less and less repairable. And if they are repairable, the parts are almost the same price as a new machine. And I think people have this experience with things like computer printers. And if it goes wrong, yes, you can get parts to repair them, but the cost of the parts is almost the same cost as a brand new machine. And this is absolutely mad. Environmentally, it's a total disaster.
Tell us a bit more about your personal project, the MG.
Yeah, my personal project, the MG, which is parked right there at the moment. I've made a lot of YouTube videos about it, so please go to my YouTube channel for more on that, which is at Nagara Workshop on YouTube.
Nagara.
Nagara Workshop on YouTube. And I'll be making a video over the next few weeks, hopefully, which will give a detailed history of that project.
That was flooded too, the MG.
It was.
Was that the most upsetting bit?
Not really. The most upsetting bit was the customers' cars. Yes, I want to move from this area, not because I don't like the area, because everyone's been ever so kind to me since I've been here, and my landlord's been great, and so there's been no problem with this workshop at all, other than the fact that it's in a floodplain. So my new place, really I'm looking for something very similar, possibly a bit smaller, possibly a bit cheaper, because I'm getting older now and I want to try and wind back the business and be properly more semi-retired. I can't see myself ever stopping work entirely because it's what I do. If I was a wealthy person retiring, I would be doing this as a hobby. But as I can't afford to do it as a hobby, I do need to do it as a little business. And the whole social enterprise part of it was more prevalent in my previous workshop, which was in Buckfast. And because I live in Buckfast-Lee, it was very, very local. So people that I knew and who knew me could walk to the workshop. In fact, I could walk to the workshop if I needed to, if I didn't have a car which was working at the time. It was really, really handy, and there was a real community social enterprise feel to that business.
Yeah, if the internet went down or there were power cuts, it seems like young people wouldn't know what to do, and older people like you with skills accumulated over years would be very essential to keeping things going. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.